like you say, the Agile and DevOps practice are, many can be easily adopted in like flat organizations, but in some highly regulated industries like finance and banking, and sometimes they have special rules, restrictions, and how for those people from those industries overcome those challenges, especially from their regulations, and like maybe in some industries, development and ops have to be separated and those kind of rules. And do you have some experience and stories to share on that, Patrick, maybe from you?
Yeah, I think I've seen a few approaches. Quite often when you say we're a company that is in a regulated industry, they talk about the whole company. And when you drill down which part is actually regulated, it is it can be pinned down to a specific part that needs to be very much governed. So that's one area where I see those companies deal with it, is that they kind of like make sure that the part that is really strictly confined is like not separated from the business, but it's kind of like modeled differently from all the other parts. The other part that I've seen is that quite often the automation and the whole kind of pipeline actually helps the regulated industry. And why? Because it creates traces of what is happening. And so an audit by somebody in an automated environment is a lot easier. They can have access to a current inventory. They can have access to all the actions that have been done by who, on what time. The users have been managed automatically. So there's an audit report from that. So those kind of industries, even though it seems like counterintuitive, they actually benefit from a lot of these parts there as well. So I don't know if that resonates with what you've been seeing, Arie.
Arie, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'm one of those guys over 50 with gray hair and a beard. So let me go back in time a bit. And it's 1998, before writing the Agile Manifesto. And I'm working in this way. And it was not exactly the way I work at the moment, but similar, right? 1998, I was doing it for 4 years at that time. And we have an organization in the Netherlands totally focusing on quality and testing, a consultancy firm. And one of the guys from that firm was in the team. And this is a business bank in the South. And this guy went berserk because this way of working in the bank, and it's ridiculous, and you will be bankrupt in a year, and blah, 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 blah. First of all, a couple of years later, his company totally switched to Agile and Agile certifications for testing, whatever the value is. So as long as it sells, right, we say other stuff. And the second part is we know that the fintech industry is moving into Agile. And highly regulated is not important because you have no other option than to change. Because if you look at banks, where I live is a little village, 17,000 people. 10 years ago, we had 6 different bank offices here. Now we have one very tiny bank office where one person is sitting. All the other banks are gone, right? Business models change. And it's not, can we do it or not? The only question is, how can we do it? And when I get back to what Patrick just said, you have this process from A to B, because we did it in the pharmacy, we did it in the aviation, we did it in the banking, in insurance, in the government. This is the process. And here you start and here you end. And it might be that here are regulations that you need to fulfill. And the only thing that you need to do is you have to take them into your process and just blend that into Agile working. But people say no before they even did try it. And you see organizations getting killed, in this kind of situations. Finance is leading in Agile transformations, and DevOps, by the way, as well. Why? Because that business model is changing every single time. Telcos, they have to. It's not an option. It's do or die, right? The question is never, is it possible? The answer is always yes. And you know why it is possible? Because it's people that make it happen. Very simple. Find a solution. Instead of having an excuse.
Right. Thanks for that. I see. Otherwise, it's about surviving of the company. Either you're survive or you're out. You will be out of industry after a few years. I see a lot of business has been disrupted by somebody totally not from your industry. Like we see a lot of internet companies are also go into finance industries. So for the banks, for the telcos, telecommunication companies, they need to find their ways to be competitive. If you are always protecting or by the rules or regulations, then it's an excuse for you to out of the business someday. So I fully agree on that. All right, we have been discussed a lot, and there's one. We also receive a lot of questions from different community, not only the DevOps community, but also other communities in China. There are some Agile communities, some other communities, and there is a question about the relationships between an Agile and practice and DevOps practices, because from the time-wise we know. That Agile Manifesto has been like 10 years earlier or 11 years earlier than the DevOps. And the question is that how, Patrick, maybe it's for you also, how do you see the practice like Agile and Lean contribute the concept and the practice of DevOps? Do you see it is they are interconnect with each other? And their question is that do you see is Agile a part of DevOps or DevOps part of Agile? How can they coexist? Are they complementary or are they conflict to each other? Start with you, Patrick. Thanks.
I'm glad you asked the question because it's like one of those internet myths that I want to like put to rest. I want to say like Agile equals DevOps. It's that simple. There's like no difference in like conceptual kind of the spirit, in my opinion. It is just a matter of like evolving practices, but in essence, it's the same. So there is no conflict, there is no tension. In my opinion, others might think differently, but I think we're trying to achieve the same thing. The difference is that we're just in DevOps kind of emerged an area that needed love in the Agile kind of practices, like, get closer to production, get the feedback from production. But again, there's nothing in my opinion from the original Agile thinking that was blocking it. It was more of people didn't go as far as they could and were stretched by new technology, by the cloud, or kind of, getting up to that speed that required like new practices. So no contradiction. I think in my opinion, we're doing a lot of similarities, whether that's you doing TDD or the ops are doing monitoring. We're trying to do small deploys. You're doing like small code changes. So all kind of these practices, like the Kanban flow was maybe more natural for people in production because it is very short, like less kind of weekly cadence or 2 weekly cadence because it was continuous, a flow of things happening in production. So no contrast there. I do want to mention, like I mentioned in the beginning, is that I do think I want to get the communities closer back together, and especially because I think the frameworks like, you can shudder all you want about SAFe or Bossa Nova or different ways of organizational thinking. I think we really need to connect back as a DevOps community to those practices instead of becoming a siloed community that kind of doesn't learn from the ideas happening in the Agile community, how they're trying to change the business side, or whether that's lean budgeting or other real options, or many of those kind of ideas are still foreign to people in the DevOps community. I'm lucky to be in both and trying to follow both, but I would like to see more cross-pollination of both of the ideas.
Right. Thanks for confirming that, Patrick. So basically, you also said, DevOps is human problems. I think both Agile and DevOps are trying to focus on the value created for the business. So in that way, in such way, they are very much in line. And also with your encouragement, more the collaborations between DevOps and Agile communities. I think with our community efforts in China, we try to more working with other existing Agile communities. And by the way, in the DevOps days, we also have a lot of speakers from other like Agile and Lean communities as well. The same question for you, Arie, because you are one of the author for Agile manifestos. What is your view, and maybe you know other authors' view of Agile manifestos, see the evolving and the emerging of DevOps? How do they see a part of each other, and how do you see the relationship between Agile and DevOps practices?
Yeah, I will not speak for others. That's up to them, right?
Right.
But if you ask me how I see Agile and DevOps, it's like yin and yang. I mean, one cannot do without the other. And like Patrick just said, if you make a DevOps department, then you didn't understand it at all, right? In my opinion, you need to have the thorough expertise and the knowledge and to keep the innovation spirit. But for me, DevOps is something, if you really want to do Agile in a proper way in the world of technology where we live, you need to have your DevOps practices in place. I know when you go into transformation, it's not something that you have overnight. But this is the objective where you need to go. You're sailing the ocean. You want to get to the other side of the ocean. You know where to go. And along the way, you will find all those storms and winds and maybe not a wind for a while. So you might, do different things than you originally thought to get there. But they are together in the world where we live in today. You cannot do one without the other. It's really like yin and yang, in my opinion, meaning both positive, by the way. Yeah.
Right. I think, Arie, by having you as our keynote speaker in DevOps Days, you already showed by actions, right? Collaboration between the two communities, and you are both the thought leaders. I think in the future, there will be more events that we have a lot of DevOps people and speak at Agile events, and the other way around, like people like you, Arie, as author of Manifesto, you will be also happy to come back to many other DevOps Days events. Right.